Welcome in to One of One Sports, the only one for your original sports commentary and analysis. With week 2 of college football in the books, it is time for our recap and reaction. And before we get that started, though, if you guys enjoy this college football content, make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel to help me grow it. Now let's get into it. We start, as we always will, with the game of the week, and that was the Michigan Wolverines traveling to Norman, Oklahoma to take on the Sooners in a Power 4 showdown. SEC. Yeah, SEC. What am I talking about? Big Ten at SEC, though. This is where College Game Day was, and really everything around the Saturday slate was about this game between two traditional college football blue blood powerhouses. And we got pretty much what I was expecting. When I did my prediction video, I said Oklahoma in a defensive battle, like we saw, kind of like LSU, Clemson, Ohio State, Texas. I didn't think a lot of points were going to be scored in this game. And there weren't, but Oklahoma still scored more than I thought they would. Like, if you would have told me, I would have said probably like 17-13 Oklahoma would have probably been my prediction. But the Oklahoma passing game was better than I thought it would be. And they held up against the Michigan defensive line a lot better as well. I was also worried because Oklahoma didn't run the ball well against Illinois State, and Michigan I thought would stop the run, which against running backs they did fine. But John Mateer and those QB draws really it was like death by 1,000 paper cuts with how consistently he was getting good yardage just from snapping it, delay, and then taking off. And then, like I said, the O-line, which was one of the worst in the country last year, already seems to be so much improved. Held up against a Michigan pass rush that I thought is pretty good. We'll see later on. Maybe it's Michigan's defensive line is just taking a big step back. But from what I think, watching Michigan's defensive line, I know it's just New Mexico, but it's still a good. Oklahoma held up better than I thought they would. Ran the ball better with the quarterback than I thought they would. And the receivers, especially, Deion Burke started hot, but then even after that, some other guys were getting separation, and Mateer was hitting them. Speaking of John Mateer, I think he proved he is the guy. I think most people thought this, but still coming in from Washington State, which I know they're Pac-12, formerly a Power 5 school, but when he was playing there, they were playing Mountain West competition for the most part, and there was no proof of concept against him playing elite competition. This was his first real test like that, taking on Michigan, and he lived up to it. He looked great, and he was really the difference in the game because for 11-point game, but Michigan and Oklahoma both had good defenses that were, really slowing down offenses that didn't have a ton going for it. But John Mateer made things happen. Getting out of a sack and hitting one throw down the sideline was incredible. Running the ball, he was Oklahoma's best offense. Where on the other side, Bryce Underwood, true freshman, had times where he didn't want to stand in there all the way, or he miscommunicated with the receivers. Could have been the receiver's fault, could have been his fault. It's hard to say. But overall, Mateer really looked to be the difference between the two teams. There were other differences, like Michigan's skill guys couldn't quite get open. They were missing their tight end as well. But I would say the biggest difference was John Mateer being a playmaker, and Bryce Underwood, immensely talented. I'm sure he's going to get there. But in terms of on Saturday, in his first big test on the road against a top 25 team in a raucous environment, he wasn't quite ready to be a difference maker. He didn't shrink or anything, and he was composed, but he wasn't to the level of John Mateer. And that was really the reason the Sooners won the game in my book. And then finally, I think the room for growth for these teams is a big talking point because for Michigan, the defense is still good, but I think it can get a lot better. Also, if Jayshon Barham plays the whole game, there could be some differences there as he was suspended for the first half. And like I said, I think the defensive line didn't play its best performance. It can still get better. But then offensively, Bryce Underwood, I think we all know is going to improve. The offensive line, I think, has some guys that are going to improve throughout the year also. And then when you're missing your tight end, Klein, who's maybe going to be your best pass catcher on the year, it's probably him or Donovan McCulley. That is a big loss. So this is a young Michigan team that was facing a first big test on the road. I think they're going to get a lot better. I wouldn't be writing them off at all. And then Oklahoma as well. This seems like it's just the start. Now, the schedule is going to be brutal. Like you can look what Oklahoma has coming up, like even winning this game. Right now, there's going to be people talking about playoff, which is too early to do that. But just looking ahead at this Oklahoma schedule, it's going to be brutal. But with Brent Venables at coach, I know that defense is going to be good, and it looks the part. And John Mateer looks the part at quarterback. And depending on how well he's going to play this year, they could reach some pretty high heights. I think both these teams still have the best yet to come for them in 2025. Now to cover the upset of the week, and that was South Florida taking down the Florida Gators in the swamp. This was pretty crazy. Like South Florida, I think everyone knew South Florida is a pretty good team. Seeing what they did to Boise in week one, 34-7, just dominating a Boise team that a lot of people, including myself, thought would be the group of five representative in the playoff. The AP ranked them top 25 coming to the year, and they just had absolutely nothing for South Florida, especially in the second half of that game. What this means for South Florida, outside of just, well, first, no, let's start with you beat the Florida Gators in the swamp. Like, that is a huge statement win for this program, and a team that's looking to be a contender in 2025 for that Group 5 playoff spot. This obviously goes a huge way. And you scheduled one of the toughest non-conference schedules in my book, playing Boise State, playing Florida, and now playing Miami next week and starting off 2-0. I don't think a lot of people would have predicted that, especially not me. So that's just super impressive. And yeah, they clearly have the early inside track to make the playoff, looking like the best G5 team, because you look elsewhere, like Boise State, you already beat them from the Mountain West. Maybe you guys like UNLV. I don't think they've looked super impressive. I know they beat UCLA, but UCLA, not very good. And then in the American, like Navy looked questionable. Tulane, I guess, looks pretty good. Beat Northwestern and South Alabama. Gets Duke next week. But as far as the group of five goes, South Florida clearly looks like the best team. Brown looks like one of the better quarterbacks in the group of five. The offense is a little interesting because there's times where it looks really explosive, like against Boise State, but also plays in Boise State where they weren't doing much at all, really throwing screens to line scrimmage, going nowhere. And in this Florida game, it was really the defense limiting Florida, which has got to be a huge concern for the Gators, because when you have what should have been a dominant O-line edge, a dominant D-line edge, Jaden Baugh should have been able to run all over South Florida. And you have arguably the most talented quarterback in college football in DJ Lagway, with some really talented receivers like the Wilsons and with Sturdivant. This shouldn't have been a game. When you bake in, you also had home field advantage. And yet Florida, I mean, it looked like maybe they could get away with it, but when they took lead 16-15 and you still blew it, DJ Lagway checks out to the passing play instead of running the ball, gives South Florida extra time. Don't know what that was about. Because looking at this Florida schedule, I mean, just looking at the next four games, you got LSU next week on the road. You've got Miami the week after that on the road. Then I believe you have Texas. I think that's at home. You have A&M. And then a couple weeks later, you're going to have Georgia. You're going to have Ole Miss. You're going to have Tennessee. You're going to have Florida State. This schedule is a monster. It's the hardest in all of FBS, in my opinion. And I think most people would concur with that. And if you couldn't beat South Florida at home, which no disrespect to South Florida, they're a good team. I already said they look to be the best team in the G5 right now. Or I guess maybe it's I don't know what it's called. Is it G6? But you guys understand the point. But if you couldn't beat that team, Florida looks to be in serious trouble. And once again, Billy Napier, seemingly unavoidably, has got to be back on the hot seat, because you can't lose this game. You have every talent. For all the games Florida's lost in the past, there could be people saying, well, you're playing teams that are just recruiting still at a higher level. They have more talent in the SEC when you're getting beat by Georgia's, or if you lose to a Bama or a Texas this year. Like, those could be excused. This is inexcusable. This is, you have every advantage and you're still not getting it done. Florida fans aren't going to like this. And now Florida, I think the biggest thing is you can't let this beat you twice, because now going on the road to LSU was already going to be a game you weren't likely to win. That's a really tough place to play against a team that, after beating Clemson, looks to be one of the best in the country. But now you're going to be demoralized. And if you come out flat against LSU, you could get housed, and this season could fall apart quickly for the Gators. They have to pick themselves up off the mat, because, I mean, this is truly an embarrassing loss to lose to this team at home. It's a really a new low in the Billy Napier era, which is sad to say, because this was supposed to be him taking the leap, and this Florida team was supposed to maybe make the playoff and have all this young talent and be this really high upside team. And right now they don't look anywhere near reaching the ceiling of what they could. Now I want to talk about some things I got right and wrong from the weekend. Every week we make some predictions, and sometimes we miss the mark, sometimes we're dead on. So starting, one thing I was right about, this Iowa State game. I said, look, ESPN had an article saying why to take the over in this game. I was like, it's crazy. It's going to be low scoring, like it always is. It's going to be a tight game. Iowa's not going to be able to move the ball, but they're going to play good defense. But the difference is going to be at the end of the game, Rocco Beck has proven he can perform in the clutch. He's going to make the winning plays. Iowa, don't trust their passing game. They're not going to be able to make those type of plays. And what do you know? Iowa State gets a field goal, and Iowa under Mark Gronkowski takes a couple sacks and goes absolutely nowhere in their last possession. dead on the money. Iowa State already with a second major win of the season, beating Kansas State, who we'll talk about shortly, and beating Iowa, and looks to be a really good team once again this year. Shout out to the Cyclones and Matt Campbell. One thing I was very wrong about, though, was picking Duke to beat Illinois. And this was one I was pretty adamant about, really confident in, and it just didn't turn out well at all. I will say the 45-19 score, look, I know it sounds bad, but it really was not indicative of the game. First, Illinois was up 14-13 at halftime, and Duke had completely outplayed them. But Duke dropped the punt that they dropped the punt to give Illinois the ball right in front of their end zone, allowing for a touchdown. And then Duke also fumbled when their other chance to score, Darian Mensah, and they had another turnover. And then in the second half, they just couldn't get out of their own way. They make a big play, the receiver fumbles the ball. They go down, Mensah throws an interception. When you lose the turnover battle 5-0, eventually, it starts building, the team becomes demoralized, and the defense was gassed by constantly having to go back on the field because the offense couldn't finish drives. And then the game unraveled. But I do think if this is a game you simulate a lot of times, like if we assume turnovers are more of a random thing in college football, that's been proven out. You assume they don't lose a turnover battle 5-0. This is a much more competitive game that I still think Duke could win a lot of the time, and I think Duke is a good team. But you also have to give Illinois credit because this is where the experience kicked in. Luke Altmaier didn't turn the ball over. And also Hank Beatty at wide receiver looks to be a number one for them, something I was concerned about them not having. The O-line, some question marks. Lucas for Duke certainly showed you if you have a good pass rusher, you could expose some things about them. And defensively, outside of the turnovers, Duke was moving the ball well on the ground and through the air, and Duke doesn't have the best weapons. So I do still think there's a lot of concerns for Illinois. I'm still not as high them as the rest of the public, but for just this week, I was very wrong about the Illini. Second thing I got wrong was Vanderbilt Commodores, and this is one I was much more happy to get wrong. As I mentioned in my prediction video, I do root for Vanderbilt. My dad did go there for school, and I don't know what happened at halftime of the Virginia Tech game, but I mean, something must have been said at halftime because Vanderbilt goes into the half down 20-10. They win the game 44-20. In the second half, they outscore Virginia Tech 34-0. They seemingly move the ball at will. Running backs are running loose all the time. Receivers are making catches down the sideline, contested catches, like pass interference calls aren't getting called. They're still catching the ball. Pavia is playing out of his mind. And Virginia Tech can't move the ball at all of a sudden after 20 points in the first half. I don't know what happened because from the first half to the second half, it looked like I was watching completely different teams. Like they swapped players at half. Virginia Tech was just like an FCS school all of a sudden against Vanderbilt after halftime. Brent Pry, I don't know what you did at halftime, but it did not work. Whatever adjustments happened were better for Vanderbilt because there was nothing apparent where I was like, no, this is what Vanderbilt changed up. It was just all of a sudden Virginia Tech couldn't plug any holes against the run. All of a sudden they're just getting beat down the sideline in coverage, and Vanderbilt's making crazy catches. And on offense, all of a sudden Vanderbilt's getting pressure. It's just everything changed. Like the first half was some sort of fluke. Wrong about that, but not too mad about it. And then I was absolutely right about the Baylor SMU game being a shootout, being all about explosive plays. It started right away with SMU hitting the 75-yard touchdown to start the game. And there were explosive days all day long from both sides. Sawyer Robinson over 400 yards. Kevin Jennings started with 100% completion, 200-something yards, and a couple touchdowns in the first half. It was absolute great game. Goes into overtime, and Baylor wins it 48-45. Do have to criticize Rhett Lashlee here. At the end of the half, there was about 30-some seconds with 2 timeouts, and Baylor hadn't been able to stop a nosebleed all game, and he chose to just go to halftime. You end up going to overtime. I'm not saying you get the field goal, you win the game, but I'm just saying to waste a possession in a game this high scoring when you've proven you can move the ball was a pretty insane decision. And then, do feel bad for Colin Rogers missing the game-winning field goal. That one was hard to hit, but then also missing the one in overtime that ultimately probably or maybe cost you a victory. Baylor could have very well scored a touchdown and still won the game. But congratulations to the Bears. You needed this after the Auburn loss, and you lost that one 38-24. You were down 38-24 in this game, came back, got it to overtime, got the job done. Congratulations to the Bears. Next, I want to talk about some stock up, stock down. And looking at the stock up, I got to go with Georgia Tech this week as a stock up team because, one, they already have the big win against Colorado where, yes, they only won by 7, but when you do that with a -3 turnover margin, it means you're clearly the better team because, like I talked about, it's more random and over like many simulations of that game, Georgia Tech will win it by more with even turnover games factoring in. So I still like what I saw from the Yellow Jackets. Run game looked good as well. But now looking around the rest of the ACC, like, yeah, Miami looks really good, but Georgia Tech doesn't play Miami this year. And Florida State, maybe there's something, but I don't think Georgia Tech plays Florida State either. Who does Georgia Tech play that could be difficult? Well, Clemson next week at home. And Clemson looks as vulnerable as I think they might be all season because after the LSU loss, they did not play well against Troy, went down 16-0, ended up winning 27-16, but the offense doesn't look good. The run game's still not there. Cade Klubnik doesn't look to be, the Heisman candidate I picked to win the Heisman in the preseason. Who knows if Antonio Williams will be back? So this Clemson team is ripe for the taking next week, and Georgia Tech gets them at home. That's huge. Who else do you have? Georgia? Do we know Georgia's a great team? No, maybe not. Duke, I think, could be a tough game for them. Well, Duke just got, kind of trounced by Illinois. So all of a sudden, this schedule is opening up for Georgia Tech, and they look like a sneaky contender in the ACC. So I'm just saying I'd be putting a little, confidence in Georgia Tech moving forward. I think they have a lot of potential, and next week is a huge spot for them. If they get it done, who knows what they could accomplish this season. Stock down, though, got to go with my Big 12 title picks. These were the two teams I picked to go to the Big 12 championship, ASU and Kansas State. Started with Kansas State. I mean, their stock has just hit absolute rock bottom. No point in even selling it anymore. You may as well hold it at zero. But after the Iowa State game was one thing, right? Those were two top 25 teams coming into the year. You figured it's going to be a really competitive game. It could go either way. I went Kansas State, ended up being Iowa State, but it was a good game, right? Then last week, you barely beat North Dakota with a late game-winning drive by Avery Johnson to win by 3, I believe. And I was willing to write that off as, okay, you were coming back from Ireland. You kind of overlooked them. You were sad about the loss. But now this week, you at home lose to Army, a team that's already lost to VMI this year. Clearly not quality competition. So this Kansas State team is starting to look a lot like last year's Florida State team, where you play that week 0 game in Ireland. People think you're one thing. You barely lose. People are like, oh, it was still a good game. You'll come back. And maybe you just did it. Like, this looks like a team that's just bad at the moment. And we'll see Friday because they go on the road to Arizona. And Arizona looks to be improved this year. They housed the weaker competition. They played Weber State and Hawaii. But right now, Arizona looks like a better team than Kansas State. And Kansas State, for as much confidence as I had coming into the year, for them to make the playoffs, that prediction looks to have already aged terribly. I'm completely out on them. They look like a team that's going to have a really, really bad season, and I don't have a lot of confidence in them turning this thing around at the moment. ASU, I don't think is going to be as bad of a scenario as that. Mississippi State is a ridiculously tough place to play. Don't understand how those cowbells are allowed. It is so loud, but you lost on the road to Mississippi State. There's not as much shame in that. Like, Mississippi State, obviously one of the weaker Power 5 teams, maybe the worst team in the SEC, but it's still an SEC school on the road at night. It's a tough game to play. And ASU really played bad in the first half, was clearly the better team in the second half. Late game execution was horrendously bad. Don't know how you play man-to-man coverage, no safety help when the only thing that beats you is a touchdown at the end of the game. Disastrous coaching, and also really bad. Like, when you have the ball at the 1 yard line, essentially with 2 plays with 2 minutes left, and somehow you end up with a field goal and allow a touchdown at that time. Just complete collapse from the Sun Devils. But that being said, they were clearly the better team over the second half, and I'm not worried they're not going to make a bowl game or something like that. But I am worried that this is clearly not last year's team. The defense doesn't get any pressure really, and when you're running man-to-man in certain spots, that certainly hurts the team. And the run backs are just inconsistent, and they're clearly not Cam Scatterbo. It's putting more on Sam Levitt's shoulders, and while he's a good runner, in the pass game, he doesn't look quite ready to carry it the way I and a lot of other people thought he could this season. So just right now, they look like an okay team, but not a Big 12 contender. And if we were looking at it Iowa State clearly looks better than them. Texas Tech hasn't been, tested yet, but probably you would think is better based off what they brought in the transfer portal. TCU after their win, Baylor seems around the same level, and then Utah, I think, absolutely is ahead of them right now. And for a team that came in as a Big 12 favorite, that's already a big step down in 2 weeks to be kind of middle of the pack Big 12 team. So their stock is down. Finally, we end with the 2-minute drill. Put 2 minutes on the clock. So Ole Miss survives against Kentucky. They survive a really rough start from Austin Simmons, a guy I picked to be a Heisman finalist this year. Not sure it was a great pick. 2 early interceptions, and he had 4 interceptions through his first 5 quarters of college football. But then they turned it around, got it going. The offense looked good, but still a little concerned only winning by 7 against Kentucky, a team I don't think is very good, and had some chances to kind of pull off another upset. Would have got deja vu to last year. So you survived, but I'm I'm more tepid now about my confidence in Ole Miss. Then Missouri, great comeback, down 21-6, comes back, ties 21-21 before half. We would think that was just 3 touchdowns, but no, there was safeties, there were scooping scores, missed extra points. It was absolutely crazy first half. And then late in the game, you put it away with a really strong ground game. And Missouri looks pretty good, better than I expected them to. And then it was a big day for blowouts. Ohio State 70-0, Oregon 69-3. Looks like, I know it was Oklahoma State, they're not very good. They look so good at Oregon. Bama blowout, Washington, FSU, Minnesota, all across the board, there were a ton of blowouts, which also makes you question the teams which didn't get blowouts. Like Penn State 34-0, but it was less than that for a while. Bit concerning. LSU 23-7, Georgia 28-6. There's just some games where it's like, okay, why didn't you get these blowouts? Clemson 27-16, even Texas 38-7 with a huge turnover margin. You would think that would be a bigger gap in terms of the final score, but it wasn't. So when all these teams are getting blowouts, it leaves you a little concerned for the teams that did it. And then finally, just want to mention NC State and Michigan State won some thrillers. Michigan State 42-40 over Boston College in overtime. NC State 35-31. Just want to give shout out to 2 great teams that had, or 2 great games that had great finishes. With that being said, that is everything for my week 2 recap and reaction. If you guys enjoyed, make sure to leave a like and subscribe to help support the channel. And we will be back Tuesday with our predictions and updated college football rankings. Until next time.